here we are, ladies and gentlemen, with my old friends, colleague, and Hall of Famer, Steve Flink. How are you, Steve? Is everything all right with you?
Yes, everything's fine, Ubaldo. It's good to be back with you again. I have a feeling you're going to lead us through a very interesting discussion today, a different conversation than we usually have.
Yes, correct. We are not talking about a tournament or what's going on at the end or while the tournament is in progress, but we are talking about a story that we published on ubitennis.net, which had this headline on the decline of American and Australian men's tennis. The best player from the US, John Isner, is 35 and ranked outside the world top 20, while the only truly great prospect seemed to be 19-year-old Brandon Nakashima, and this might be the lowest point for American tennis. I had sent you the story that we published, and I'd like to know what is your opinion about.
Well, I don't like being put in this position as an American journalist, having to defend my country, but I will. No,
Yeah.
it's a good story, Ubaldo. You point. I mean, the facts are clear, and the trend has been clear for a long time. I would add just a quick thing about right now, though. I do think we have a few more out there who could potentially break through. Taylor Fritz is one who's on the borderline with me. I think he has a chance. He has a real chance. He hasn't had a great year. Francis Tiafoe has been disappointing for the last year and a half, but I feel like Fritz has the right mentality and a good all-around game, very good server, good off the ground, very aggressive, potentially could be a top 10 player. So I would add that. But overall, I think the numbers are so clear, Ubaldo, and the reasons are numerous, as you pointed out in your piece.
Yes, because just to make a little resume of the situation, in the year, let's say, when the ATP computer started, there were 23 Americans in the top 100, 3 in the top 10, and 3 in the top, and 3 more in the top 20, so there were 6 in the top 20. Then in the 80s, we split up 8 in 81. There were 43 Americans in the top 100, 6 in the top 10, 7 plus 7 more in the top 20. And then in 91, they decreased a little bit. They went down from 43 to 25 in the top 100, but they were still 4 in the top 10 and 4 in the top 20. While if we skip, let's say, the beginning of the year 2000, when we had 8 top 100 only and 2 in the top 10, then now we have 9 only Americans in the top 100, 0 in the top 10, 0 in the top 20. And while in Europe, we have 68 in the top 100, 9 out of 10 in the top 10, and 16 out of 20 in the top 20. Then we can also talk about Australia, but with you, I think it's more interesting to talk about America, but it's true that also, if I can mention just the last rankings, in the top 100, there are only 5 Australians, and none of them is either top 10 or top 20. So what is the analysis? Why this is happening? You say there are numerous reasons, but in your opinion, what has been made wrong? And then I can tell you what is my feeling.
Well, just a couple of points, Ubaldo, I'd like to make. The turning point to me, I was thinking as you were giving all those very important statistics about what's happened over the time since 1973 when the ATP rankings were introduced, is that the turning point for American tennis going downward was when the Sampras, Courier, Agassi, Chang generation, backed up by Todd Martin and Mal Washington, but mainly those 4 guys, they were so dominant in the 90s. We got spoiled. They followed in the footsteps of Connors and McEnroe. But you think about it, Sampras 6 years in a row at #1 from 93 to 98. Courier finished #1 in 92. Chang was number 2 in the world. Agassi won 8 majors and he got to number 1 in the world. They had phenomenal success. And then they were followed by Roddick and Blake. And Roddick, as you mentioned in your piece, last American to win a major at the 2003 US Open and last American to be number 1. He still was up there early 2004 after finishing 2003 at number 1. I don't fully understand it, Ubaldo. I think we should talk a little bit in a minute after you give your views about the comments from Mark Winters, who is quite an authority on this, having worked with a lot of the great American junior players in his time in a coaching capacity. But I don't know if it's the system so much as it's other countries, the improvement made in other countries. You look at Serbia, some of the countries that have emerged, and you pointed out in your piece that there's so many more players worldwide now than there used to be, and the game is so popular in those other countries. We struggle over here, we always have, Ubaldo, to get the best athletes to play tennis, as opposed to going to basketball, football, or baseball, where they see a chance to make a larger living, to make more money. I think that's a part of it. What are your thoughts?
So I'd like to know if money is the main factor. If money is the main factor, the reason why the Americans first they try all the other sports, also because, as you well know, only the top 120 players in the world make a good living with tennis. While I guess you probably know better the numbers in America, how many athletes can survive decently well in basketball or in baseball or in football or even in ice hockey, I think. So
well, but you know, Father, they also sign contracts. It's a little different. Yes, it's true that tennis players, they sign, if they get to a certain level, they have sponsorships and they make a lot of money off the court that way. But there are many players that are not in a position to really get that kind of money. They have to make it in prize money. While the athletes in baseball, basketball, football, hockey, they go to the team signs them up, and sometimes to a multi-year contract, sometimes to a 10-year contract. So they have it. That is more appealing to many of our young athletes. I think that's the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah, well, you know, in Europe, as you know, the major sport is soccer, and you know, football.
Yes.
What you American call soccer, we call it football because we took it from the English word. And in soccer, I would say that at least 6,000, maybe even 8,000 Europeans, players, soccer players, playing in the major leagues, Italian, Spanish, British, German, French. There are at least 6,000 players because every team, every major league has about 20 teams, and each team has 25 players. So if you multiply 25 per 20, it makes 450 already players who make a lot of money in each nation. So if you multiply by let's say 6-7 countries, you immediately reach 3,000-4,000 players who make for sure more than 100,000 euros a year, or euros or dollars, and so it's a huge difference, because of course if you have a chance to be one of those 6,000 soccer players, or you have to be in the top 100 worldwide in tennis. Of course, you have much easier path to get money for living playing soccer than playing tennis. So I guess in America must be the same if you compare tennis with the other 4 major sports.
Yes, it's very similar. I don't have the numbers at my disposal for these other sports, but that's how the system tends to work, and it accommodates a lot of very good players for their teams for many years too.
Yeah, so the only thing is that I could point out is that this situation has been there for quite a while. I mean, also in the 90s when Sampras, Courier, Chang, and Agassi were up there, there were already those four major sports.
Are you accusing me? Are you accusing me of making excuses for the Americans?
No, no. I'm just saying that I'd like to know. First of all, I have the impression that the USTA, that you know much better than me, doesn't have probably a good system to help the young players to emerge, and because if not. Since tennis is a family game, you still should have some more good standard player, and you don't have. So you know, in it, I can tell you about Italy that now has 8 players in the top 100, 4 in the top 40 or 50, let's say. And something changed since the Italian Tennis Federation decided to help also the private team, the private coaches, because before there were the players raised up by the federation and the other ones, and there were 2 separate bodies, often conflicting. Now, the Italian Federation understood that it was much better to help those private entrepreneurs and coaches and teams and see if they could help young players to come up. I wonder if this happens also in the USA, or if the USTA has privileged just its own organization, its own national center, without helping those young kids who try to make their path through different ways.
Well, no, we do have many national training centers, and the main one, of course, is where the USTA has their Orlando headquarters in Florida. Yeah. And then we have them in Texas and California. We have so many national coaches, prominent players. I don't know whether they're to blame, Ubaldo. I feel like the system's been in place for a long time. As you know, Patrick McEnroe headed it up for about a decade, and he worked hard. We've had some good people before and after him working on it. You know what I always think of, Ubaldo? You remember when Connors and McEnroe were starting to decline a little in the latter half of the 80s? There was a panic that came, and that's when they created this player development program. And the feeling was, who do we have to replace Connors and McEnroe? We've got to get a system in place, and they did. And then within a couple of years, suddenly that whole group of Sampras, Agassi, Chang, Courier emerged, and it really wasn't just because of it. Probably had very little to do with the player development. It was a great crop of players. I still think part of this is cyclical. You know, there will come a time where we'll get a bunch of players like you have in Italy right now, and we'll have a bigger presence in the American game. I've been surprised, to tell you the truth, after Roddick left, that it's turned out quite the way it has. I thought at one stage Isner might have a slightly more successful career. I've been a little surprised. I don't know if it's a question of the system in place or the fact that the other countries have improved so significantly. I mean, Serbia, Spain, so many countries, Croatia, where they're developing these players and where maybe tennis is a bigger priority.
Well, first of all, those names that you mentioned before, Sampras, Chang, Agassi, they were all son of immigrants. They were all people who were very much motivated. And it's like in Italy, we had for some time some good players enough, and like Panatta, Bertolucci, Barazzuti, and so on, who were some of...
You left out one. Ubaldo, didn't you leave out one of that group?
Panatta, Bertolucci, Barazzuti, and Zuccarelli.
And Scanagatta.
No, I wish. No, you know, I belonged, it's true, I belong to a different social background. Those four that I mentioned, They were
Yeah.
not son of immigrants like Agassi, Chang, and Sampras, but they were son of tennis pro, tennis guardians at the tennis club in Rome. They were coming from humble families who had more motivation than probably I had. For instance, I myself or people of my same social background. And that is important because, of course, in my case, my father wouldn't have been happy if I was going to be a tennis teacher. He would have loved to have me as a doctor, engineer, professor, I don't know, lawyer, I mean, or even a journalist, but not a tennis coach, okay? While for Bertolucci, Panatta, and all the others, in case they would have not succeeded as a tennis pro and economically, for them it was already, I don't know, yeah, it was already good to have a teaching career. So what I'm saying is that when you're talking about Croatian, Serbian, Russian, many of them are very, very much determined to reach certain level. And probably it was the same for the Agassi, the Chang, and the Sampras. Now, in America and also in Italy or in Europe, those families who have a good economical standard, they don't push their son, their children to play 6 hours a day, just one sport. They prefer them to have maybe 3, 4 different sports to practice. And so it's more difficult if you have that kind of background to try all your best to become just a tennis player. So I don't know if you understand what I'm saying, if I'm clear enough. Are you there? I can see your image frozen. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but my voice is not. Do you hear me now, Ubaldo?
Yes, yes, now yes.
Okay, I think those are good points. You know, the hunger factor. You're talking about the hunger and the need to excel as a player. I get that. Whether that's a problem, that's probably one of the factors right now. I suppose you could make that argument, but you would think in a country as big as ours, you know, that with so many, you know, I mean, with all the indoor facilities in the East and all the hard courts in the West and all the training facilities that the USTA have set up, that there would be some players emerging that do have that drive and that obsession. Obsession is what you're getting at. You have to really want it so badly to succeed, and you feel like that's been lacking, and it probably has. It probably has, but I don't fully understand why.
Well, maybe there are not enough incentives. Maybe, as you said before, the young kids prefer to try in different sports where they can make more money. I mean, in America, more than in other places, and I don't want to be offensive, the money concept is very, very important. I mean, Americans talk much more about money than what we feel we talk about money in Europe for some reason. I don't know if it's what is the origin of that. But even if we read what Mark Winters has been writing to you and me, and we will publish that story too. And he thinks he thinks that there is not so much hunger. I mean, when the American kids say, "Oh, we have been working a lot, hard, and so on," he says that there are more words than facts. I don't know if that you agree or not on that.
Well, I don't know if I respect what he's saying, and I think he's in tune with it, having been a part of the system himself. He actually was one of the people that really helped a lot with Sampras and Agassi and that group in the Junior Davis Cup. So he followed it closely, and has continued to with his work with the Southern California Tennis Association. So I respect what he's saying immensely. I don't know if I totally agree, but I think Mark knows what he's talking about. What did you think?
No, I mean, you and him must know better. You and him must know better the American situation than I do. In my opinion, look, let's say the politics is very often important when in studying the system and the incentives, how to help the young kids, because, you know, the big difference nowadays compared to 20 years ago or 30 years ago is that nowadays to become a pro capable to survive with money, unless you are an incredible, huge talent, number 1 or 2 or 3 of the world, you get there only when you are 23, 24, 25 years old. While the Chang, the Wilander, the Becker, they were able to become already good and financially healthy, wealthy, when they were 17, 18, 19. So that makes much longer the road to survive economically, because nowadays, if let's say you start to be competitive, a competitive player when you are 10 years old or under 12 or under 14, before you make money enough to pay for yourself, for an eventual coach, for a team, and so on, you may have to work and practice and for 12 years, 14 years is much longer. So that is a huge problem, which before they didn't have it. The Agassi.
Then the other factor is that they're playing, and when Sampras played his last match at 31, and Becker leaving at 30, Edberg, that they tended to be when you were 30, you thought you were through. Now this current generation is showing that the careers can last longer on the back end. And we see, you know, Federer is going to still be a force at 40. And
sorry if I interrupt you. That is true, but it doesn't help the creation of the players, because okay, once you are there, you live longer, you stay longer, you make money longer. But the problem is that if you don't have a financial independent situation, if your parents are not rich, and you have to build up your own career. You start playing tennis at 10 years old, more or less, to be competitive when you are 14 or 16 or 15, because if you start later than 12, you will lose 6-love, the first 3, 4, 5 tournaments, and you will quit.
Right,
So you start at 10, and then you must have the endurance, the economical endurance to survive for 10, 12, 14 years before, unless you are again a Nadal or a Federer, I mean, huge, incredible talent. Let's say you have an average talent. It takes 12 years, and you cannot afford. So. Knowing that this is the actual problem, the federation of each country should find a way to help these young players to survive for 12, 14 years before they can build up their career. So that is where the politics are important. And now I can tell you that in Italy we are and I am very critical towards our federation all sports federation, not just tennis, because the people who sit on a chair, they want to stay there forever. Some people have been president of their own federation for 20 years because they prestige, some money, power, influence, and they don't want to leave. And this is wrong, in my opinion. But it is also wrong what happens at the USTA, where every 4 years you change completely the president, the vice president become president, and there is not a continuity. And the person who stays there for 4 years, I mean, I don't know how much really cares about looking ahead and build a system that has to last more than his place on the chair. Do you understand? Do you follow me?
But of course, we have the people working permanently for a long time as executive director. Gordon Smith used to have that job. They may be paying more attention to the development of the players than the president of the USTA because they're there for longer and their jobs are different. But you're right. The system is very tricky in terms of leadership. The administrative leadership of the presidency. I wish they could. I wish they could have terms. I'd like to see them can do. Two terms of 4 years, adding up to 8, you can get a lot.
Yeah, we have some problems on the line. We have some problems on the line. I don't know what's going on, but I mean, there are some connecting problem. Anyway, so okay. So, but how many are the people that really are responsible for the American tennis, apart from the president who stays 4 years? I mean, those one that I don't know, the executive. Who is the main?
Well, the executive director. The post that Gordon Smith had. They stay there. I don't know if they have a set contract for a certain number of years, but they stay there a long time.
Yeah.
Somebody like Stacey Allister, who's the tournament director of the U.S. Open now, who came into work right under Gordon. She will probably be there for a very long time, and that gives them a chance to really accomplish. They're thinking much more about players and emerging players and juniors and long careers and bringing back American tennis to the level they'd like to see it be again.
Yeah, but do you have an idea how much money is invested in that side of the job? Because I mean, sometimes we have the feeling that some European federation spend a lot of money to protect their own seats, chairs, careers, and maybe they don't spend enough for young emerging players. And so I have no idea in America how much financial help is given to the development of the young prospects compared to the rest. I know and I can imagine that it's very important to have the US Open making a lot of money so that you can distribute more money to all different sections. But I have no idea if the money which is spent in the young prospects is important.
Well, no, I don't have the precise figures, Ubaldo, but I know they're paying those national coaches big salaries, and they put a lot of money into that, no doubt. Now, they also had to make some adjustments because of the pandemic. I think that changed everything in terms of what the kind of money they had to pay out to their coaches and to the player development. It got cut way back because of what happened in the U.S. Open this year.
Yeah, but this is a problem of this year. Yeah. We are talking in general of the problem of the American and Australian decline since quite a few years. So before the COVID.
I agree. I'm saying until this year, I think the money was not the issue. I think they put plenty of money into coaching and into junior development, and so I don't think it's a question that they needed to fund it better, but we just haven't been able to keep up with the rest of the world. That's why I say, to me, it's partially inexplicable. I think we have some excellent coaches over here and some good programs, and even with kids going into other sports, we still have a lot of bright prospects all the time. Now, why they haven't turned into Andy Roddick's, I don't know. I really don't know.
Well, one thing that I can tell you about my personal experience about the Italian tennis, but also I would say the Eastern countries uh, situation is that when a national coach is as a salary, a permanent salary by some kind of association, the national, the USTA, or I don't know, the sectional, uh, I don't know, Florida or California, or whatever. If the coach is somehow guaranteed that whatever he is capable to produce, he will get anyway his salary, is different than in Europe for those private teams that start practically with no money. They invest on themselves, making a bet, saying, will we be able to help this young kid to become a pro, a good pro? And they risk every day, and they may start going with their pupils, playing minor tournaments, sharing the room in a 1-star or 2 stars hotel. And that is different because the hunger of the coach is the hunger of the players too. So I have no idea if in America, those one that you call national coach are people who, in a way, whether they're successful or not, their salary doesn't change that much because the motivation is completely different. The hunger is completely different. And this is my guess. I have no idea. Again, if there are private teams, sometimes they are parents. Parents, for instance, I guess the girl, the Russian Sonia Kenen or Sofia Kenen, she had her father who had no money, putting all his efforts, like once Stefano Capriati or Pierce, Mr. Pierce with Mary Pierce.
Jim Pierce, right?
Yeah,
right.
They were risking their poor economical basis, hoping to find to get a player from their daughters, or and probably also the Williams with Venus and Serena. So I wonder if in America there are still private teams or a lot of parents like the Chang parents or the Agassi parents who invested in their pupils.
Well, I think in many cases they did, and you look at someone like that generation we talked about. Courier's background was a bit different, and you mentioned immigrants in other cases. Courier was a homegrown boy, and it was a different situation with him, and he had tremendous drive. I guess it gets back to Ubaldo, to that old question: are champions born or are champions made? That was a debate we've always had, and it has to come from within. And historically, we've always had those, ever since the inception of the game. Americans have been prominent and up at and near the top until this last period since Andy Roddick in 2003. But even then, you mentioned the Williams sisters, of course, a classic case of people coming up from an almost impoverishment. You know, they grew up in Compton, California, and that was one of the most amazing stories we've ever had in American sports, to have the two of them become two all-time greats. And we do have a lot of top American women. Madison Keys and Sloane Stephens won the U.S. Open in 2017. The American women recently have done a lot better than the men. And some of them are emerging from the same programs, some not, some private coaches and fathers, like you mentioned. But the American women's game is much stronger right now than the men.
Yeah, but that's why we have to find out to understand why, for instance, if you go and look in the top teenagers, you apart from Nakashima, who is 203 in the world, we have Sinner, who is 46, Musetti is 123, the Spanish Alcaraz is 136. Then you have some guy from Taiwan, Zheng, Draper from UK, and then another Italian, another Argentinian, two Argentinians in the top 10, and the only two Americans are one guy, one is Nakashima, the other one is Brooksby. So I wonder what is the reason for that. I mean, I would like to have an idea of what the analysis have been done in America to describe and to explain, because if you, most of the times you who are an expert and know your tennis world better than many, you still is unexplicable. I think we should be able to find some kind of explanation.
Well, I'd like for you to tell me then, because I'm looking out there. I'm trying to examine it and figure it all out, and some of it does not make sense to me, because I believe a country of this size, with this many gifted players out there trying. Some go to college, as you know. So Isner played college tennis. Some of them take that route and come out later. Maybe that's part of the reason why we don't have some of the younger ones emerging like you have with Sinner. But I don't know. I've been wrestling with this myself for the last 10 to 15 years, trying to come up with reasons. Some of that, I don't have many good reasons, other than I think it could change on a dime, as they say. We could suddenly get three great players coming along in the next 5 years that are now in the 14 and unders or the 16 and unders. We know nothing about them, who suddenly emerge and become great prospects when we least expect it. That was my point about the late 80s, is that nobody really saw that group being anywhere near as strong as it was with the Sampras, Agassi, Chang, Courier. That's why the USGA did player development. They didn't think they had anybody coming along to replace Connors and McEnroe. I think we could have something like this happen again in the next 5 years. So I haven't lost hope.
Well, you know, as I was mentioning before, the problem is now that you need more years to develop a good player. Okay, you don't need necessarily to have a junior or a teenager champion, but if it doesn't come out a junior or a teenager champion, because those are usually the exception right now. They are those who are particularly talented or particularly determined. But then, okay, once in America, you had the college, the colleges were, let's say, building the players of the future. And not just the Americans. There were also some foreign players who came to play in the USA. We had our Sanguinetti, we had Paul Harris, the Dutch player, who took advantage of the college Now, either the players don't want to wait too long, so they don't even think that they could become a good professional tennis player after the college, being 24, 25 years old, and so they don't even apply or try the college.
Yeah, but Ubaldo, that's what I was trying to get at earlier. Is I think that some of them now, when they look at Federer and Nadal and Djokovic and many others, Isner played some of his best tennis into his mid-30s. He seems to be declining now, but they've seen more and more players, Stan Wawrinka, who are playing great tennis into their mid-30s, sometimes their late 30s. That makes some young players here maybe think differently, that they could go to college, leave college at 22, and still have many big years, have 10 or more, 15 years ahead of them in pro tennis. I think that might change the thinking of a lot of players in the way they're groomed, that they could go to play college tennis and play it for 4 years.
Oh, yeah, that could be an idea, but in that case, you need to have two things at the same time. One, to have a clever, mature boy who is patient enough to say, look, I can wait. I don't need to become a champion being 18 or 20 years old. I need to first to do my studies, college, and then see and try hard and see if I will be able to become a good, a champion or a great, good tennis player. The other, and this is one aspect, so the player himself and his background, his family, nobody have to be in a rush, because if he's in a rush of making money, there is no way he can first attend the university and so on. Second aspect would be the organization of the college and the help that the USTA would give to those colleges who develop a good tennis program with a good tennis calendar, a lot of matches. I mean, with some sort of incentives. We know that in the American system, you cannot give money to those college athletes who are not professional, because you cannot be at the same time professional and college. So, but you must find a way, like to provide a scholarship for when they will come out of the college, and say, look, if you will be able to, I don't know, get in the top, I don't know, 50, 40, 80, at the end of your college path, then you will have the USTA or some foundation or sponsor will guarantee you a scholarship of, I don't know, $200,000. In that case, the motivation for the young kids, the young students, would have some goal to reach.
Yeah, I like that. I like that way, that thinking. I think that could be a very effective. I'm sure that's something they're considering right now. They must be. They see what's going on in the with these players succeeding into their. They weren't. Nobody really anticipated this before this last 5 to 10 years. The players going into their 30s, so far into their 30s, and still succeeding. So I have to believe the USTA has thought about that link to the colleges and having a plan, much like you just talked about.
Well, I think we should. I mean, we are. I mean, you are an Hall of Famer. I am a nobody in the American tennis world. I would say that we could start also with our proposal through B-Tennis, through Mark Winters, through all those people who really care, to suggest, and maybe they have, as you said, they must have thought, but we don't know it. Someone should give us an answer. We should, I don't know if we should talk to Stacey Alistair, or you should name who could be the person who could answer us. We should start, we could try to get some answers and say, look, is this strategy something that you've thought of, that maybe you consider wrong, or what else are you planning to do?
Well, I think that could be, I think the way to go about that, Ubaldo, is we could bring on, we could have them come on one of our discussions here. Have a nice three-way discussion with one of the, somebody from the USTA who would tell us what their plans are.
Yeah. Do you think you could, I will send you, of course, the tape of this conversation of ours. Do you think you could forward this tape once you receive it to one of these persons and ask,
yes.
like Stacy or whoever you think is the most, I don't know, it could be also someone of Tennis Channel, who, for sure.
Well,
those people of Tennis Channel, they have the whole interest to finally see South American players coming up.
I think, Aldo, I think the first idea is better. Yes, Tennis Channel is very interested, but I think we should get. I can start with an email to Stacey Alistair and see what she thinks about coming on herself or having somebody else come on instead to talk with us, because they know, they're right in the thick of it. They know they're in the planning of it. They know exactly what's going on, and then I think we might get some answers.
Yeah. Let's. Let's try to do this to follow this path and see what comes out. I mean, I have. I'm Italian, so in a way, I shouldn't even have that much interest to promote American tennis. I'm saying in general, it's good for tennis if it's not an European phenomenon. We have the US Open, the Australian Open. Can you imagine if those two slams would have players capable to win it? While right now, you don't have players even capable to reach the last 8, almost.
No, I agree. I think it's very important that a prominent American come along in the men's game and at least be in the mix. I mean, you think about what it was like in Roddick's time. He beat Juan Carlos Ferrero to win the US Open. Federer was his big rival. Obviously, Federer was much better, but it was fun to watch Roddick play Federer. You need a mix of nations, and we need some top American in the mix, particularly to raise the popularity of the game in this country. But I think it actually helps worldwide, because fans all over the world have been accustomed to American players succeeding.
Yeah, and and if you think about the origin, and I mean the Australian tennis too. I mean, if you think they won 15 Davis Cup out of 18 years, and those other 3 years were won by the USA. I mean, it's a pity that two, leading nations which have tradition, culture, and everything have practically disappeared from the headlines of all. Of course, you have been doing better with the women, and sometimes, as you said before, there are cyclical seasons. I mean, even as an Italian, I can mention the women. We had 4 top 10 winning 4 Federation Cup, and we had no men at all. And then suddenly now we have good men and we have no women. But and also every nation had, the samples are very important. If you think that after Borg, there were 4 or 5 Swedes who were capable to reach the top 10. And then when after Becker and Stick and Graf, also there were the Tommy Haas and the Kiefer and the other players. So, and now we see Croatian, Serbian coming out every other day. So the samples are important, but I think that also some work must be done behind the curtains, and we should find out what Americans and Australians are doing to avoid this decline.
Yeah, yeah, good idea, good idea. Because obviously they've been hit hard in Australia, and I'm sure they have their explanations. They had their best years when it was still more of a grass court game. Yes,
Yeah.
it's true that Hewitt and Rafter later on, Hewitt and Rafter came along in you know,
Well,
and
yeah.
Rafter was great on the Wimbledon grass, hard court, maybe even better on hard courts. Hewitt was better on hard courts, but the best Australian days were when we still had 3 of the 4 majors on grass courts.
Well,
And
but
it's never
that is easy to explain, Steve, because all other countries almost didn't have a grass courts. So I mean,
no,
except Brits, everywhere else they didn't have grass courts. So it's normal
well, we
that
did,
on grass.
we did, Ubaldo. We had them here too. We had grass courts here.
Yeah. Well, so what I'm saying
Yeah,
is, American Australians were winning on grass courts because you were the only nations, together with Great Britain, were grass courts. Of course, so it's quite normal that all the
right.
other nations were unable to produce grass court players. I mean, with some exceptions, of course, but in general. But now that we play 70% of the tennis, the pro tennis is played on our court. There is no reason why American or Australians shouldn't have anybody in the top 20 when Americans have a population of 300 million.
Right.
And so it's a matter of money, it's a matter of incentives, it's a matter of um, also probably social backgrounds, because also some humble families who don't have money enough, they prefer to send their children to play those sports where it's easier to climb up and make some money. And so there are many reasons we explored a little bit all of them. But there should be also some kind of reaction. And since neither me or you, we are politicians, so it's not that if we ask Stacey Allerster or somebody else to discuss the problem, it's not that we want to sit on their chairs. It's not that we are a political party of opposition. We are not Democrats fighting Republicans or Republican fighting Democrats. We love our sport, and we would love to help and probably even discuss the problems, should maybe help a bit, even if we don't think that we have discovered the hot water.
Yes, right. I hear you. I hear you. No, it's a good idea. I'd like to follow up, and maybe at some point we also could talk to somebody like John Newcomb in Australia to discuss what's happened there. Somebody like Newcomb would have interesting things to say about the state of Australian tennis.
Yeah. Okay, let's try. So I think we have been talking, and of course we can also maybe next time join also Mark Winters if he likes, so that we can debate again all together, and maybe can add, as he already done, some extra thoughts on what we're talking. But the best idea.
Why not? Good. Mark would have a lot of good things to say.
Okay, so listen, thanks a lot for being with us, with me, with Ubi Tennis, and again, we're trying our best because we love our sport, and we would love to give our contribution, and then we will see what happens. Hope.
Absolutely, Ubaldo. Good discussion. I enjoyed it.
Okay, So thanks a lot to Steve Flink, my old friend, colleague, and Hall of Famer, and talk to you soon on ubitennis.net, com, s, all of them. One moment.